So yeah, good afternoon, everyone. This is Du Young from KAIST, and thank you for coming to our panel session about kind of complaining and about the review systems and distinguish the way to solve that. And yeah, so as you can see, we have amazing panels like this. So for a little bit of ice breaking, why don't we just self-introduce yourself briefly and talk about the biggest complaint what you have for current reviewing system. And so like your thought about current reviewing system. And yeah, let's go.
I was a bit surprised. my thought. It's a lot of work.
Say who you are.
Introduction first,
Oh,
yeah.
sorry. So, my name is Tam, and I'm from University of Canterbury, New Zealand. For those of you, what else do you expect? We didn't have any conversation just before this. I was just asked by Kang Su to come out here yesterday, and so it's like definitely. So I have been, I started my PhD in 2011 and I graduated in 2015. During that time, I had been reviewing for ISMAR and other conferences and journal. So I think throughout my career, I have reviewed over 300 papers, journal, conference included. And so, yeah, it's been a long journey. Yep. So, well, thank you. That's exactly why I shouldn't be up here. You know, people without experiences, and yeah, it's the honest opinion. Yeah. What else you want? Right.
We need all opinions from all ages of people. So thank you, Tam, for being here. And Tam was also an associate paper chair this year for ISMAR. So thank you for that service. Uh, I'm Janine Stefanucci. I am up here to help Du Young with the panel, but also because I'm interested in hearing thoughts about reviewing from the general audience. Obviously, being technical program chair this year, I heard about some of the review processes for papers here. I've involved in the IPC and reviewing and been program chair at VR, been associate editor at TVCG. So I've seen a lot of, and also review for lots of psychology journals and been associate editors there. So I've seen a lot of reviewing, and I'm just interested in thinking about how we can train reviewing a little better than maybe we're doing now too for junior people, because I know that's a tough thing to think about when you're young, and maybe we could put some thoughts there.
Hi everyone, I'm Vojko Popescu. I'm from Purdue University. I review for ISMAR and VR. I've been reviewing for quite a few years now. I was papers chair for a couple of times, and yeah, I too would like to improve the process a little bit. And I don't know, you asked us to say one thing that maybe we feel isn't right. So I would like for the primary reviewers to actually provide a full review. There you go.
Hi, I'm Tabitha Peck. I'm a professor of computer science at Davidson College in the United States. I have been a program chair at VR and ISMAR and SUI and VRST. And I was trying to count the number of times I've done this, and I think it's 10. So, yeah. I think one of my biggest complaints is getting quality reviews on time. That's one of my biggest complaints.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me okay? Because on this stage, this is kind of like a howling, so I'm not sure if it actually sounds good to you or not. And then my name is Kang Soo Kim. I'm from the University of Calgary, Canada. And then I'm an assistant professor there in electrical and software engineering. And then I've been in this community actually for a while. This is actually my first international conference in 2008. Thankfully, the general chair, Dr. Jong-il Park, was actually my master's supervisor. At the time, I asked him, like, can I go to ISMA without any papers, anything? I just asked him, and then he generously said, "Oh yeah, you can go." That's how I started this kind of like a community activity from there. And then I started like more in terms of this reviewing process or those kind of activities. I mean, from time to time, I reviewed the papers, but I think I started more actively review all the papers and then participated in this process like 2018 or 19-ish. So it's been like 6 years or so. And then to this year, I was in that program, like the committee as a, what was that, associate paper chair? Yeah, associate. That's kind of like confusing because this time it was kind of like a new, so associate paper chair. So I'm still learning as you guys, and then but I felt I learned something, and then I realized there's some sort of like a difficulties in this process. So maybe I can share that kind of things. But one thing, if I actually pick one out of many, I would say we're lacking the reviewers. It's really difficult to find quality reviewers. As Tabitha mentioned, on time receiving the review is important. But I think a lot of like the issue is because it's difficult to find quality reviewers that will actually delay the process. So that's biggest concern among many other concerns, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, so thank you for introduction. And I totally empathize with all things. And as a fresh PhD, I also, what I just submitted the paper and what I, after that, just do right after that is it working or not? Sorry. Yeah, just pray to get a great reviewer. So, yeah, so, yeah, so as I mentioned, so I'm a like fresh PhD, so I mostly work just like submitted, but now I'm more conducting some like the program committee and something like that. So I'm more in charge of reviewing, and I now empathize with how it is difficult to get a good reviewers and assign it to the paper in time. So yeah, thank you. So yeah, next slide, please. So yeah, as we already introduced, I'm a moderator of this session. We have 5 amazing panels. So let's start with our first question about the AI dilemma. Can you press? So yeah, nowadays regarding generative AI, where do we draw the line for the author and reviewers at ISMAR, and what should our official policy be to protect review integrity and confidentiality? So let me start with Kangsu with the microphone. Or Tabitha. Yes, please.
I'm going to send this as a question to the audience. I know. No. Hang on. How many of you want to have your paper reviewed by AI? No one is raising their hand. Oh. Yeah. How many do not want their paper reviewed by AI? So I think that tells you my opinion on it. So I don't think that we should be using AI in the reviewing process. Is that the question? Yeah. Okay. And I don't think you want it to be used either, which also should tell you that you shouldn't use it.
So just to give an example, the AI, you all know this, could say, maybe they should cite this paper that doesn't exist. That happens all the time in my classroom setting now, so that's terrible for the field. But 2, if you're not as adept at statistics, like the AI often makes mistakes in thinking about statistical inferences and mathematics. It's just not quite there yet. And so it could give you back a criticism about a paper that may be ill-founded if you actually know the statistical procedure a little better. Third thing I think is really important to point out is that you are taking someone else's work if you are doing this and you're uploading it into a system that now has all of the information from their paper, and they did not agree to that. And now you have literally like maybe given away some confidentiality or privacy of their information. So anyway, I just think these are all things to think about in terms of this process, and maybe we should take that into consideration.
I think the question is also about whether to allow authors to use Gen AI to write their papers. So, um, especially for empirical validation, you still have to do that now. If the AI helped design your study, I don't know, maybe that is fine, but probably the idea should still be yours as an author. If AI gets to the point where it can actually do 10 years worth of research, I think we should all just move forward to those 10 years and then continue from there. But we're definitely not there right now. So you'll also ask, how do you know whether the paper was written with substantial help from Gen AI? And it's not easy. We went through several experiments, and out of 8 people, 5 thought that it was AI generated, and 3 thought it was not. So we don't have a good way for telling, and any suggestions would be welcome, because this is, if nothing else, it'll increase the number of submissions exponentially, and then everything gets even harder because of that.
And you want to go first this time?
Yeah. To me, you may actually have like a different opinions, but to me, I think it matters. I mean, the quality of AI matters as well. So eventually, I don't know the future, but eventually, I think we're gonna actually rely on the AI for these reviews or something in somewhere in the future. But at least to me, the current version of like a generative AI is not sufficient to evaluate our work. And then when we actually share these submissions with other reviewers and program IPC, the international program committees, what we're expecting is their opinions about the papers. So their judgment about the paper. That's why we share these papers with them. That's why I mentioned about there's a difficulty to find quality reviewers. But if this generative AI actually replace their role, then at least for now, I don't think it works well. And then I think at some part, we can actually use this generative AI. For example, like I'm not an English native speaker, so I have my own thoughts. I mean, to be honest, like let's be frank here. I use this generative AI when I review the papers. I review the paper, and then I know the points that I would like to review. So initially, I wrote the review, and then I upgrade this the flow, because to be honest, my writing is actually not so great compared to the generative AI in terms of that native speakers, wordings, those kind of things. And then I double check that's what I wanted to say or not. And then I put that the reviews. That's how at least, I mean, not all time, but from time to time I use this generative AI to improve my reviews. But a lot of cases, what I found in this reviewing process, sometimes I see, oh, this is not something that human wrote. I mean, basically like, and then, like typically we can actually identify, at least for now, the current generative AI output, people can, not easily sometimes, but often you can identify, okay, this is probably from generative AI. That's what I'm more concerned about, this reviewing process in terms of the use of the AI, not necessarily like grammatic like corrections or like that kind of things.
Well, I probably play devil's advocate. As Tab, you were asking if I would, have AI review my paper, and I put up my hand. I want to elaborate on that a little bit more, and I feel like had a conversation with Gun earlier about if, say, the community really do want to prevent usage of, AI generated review, for example, shouldn't the community provide the default go-to, language model, for example, that is trained on our own papers, that is relevant for our community, along with examples of quality review and quality grades of those papers, for example. Those are, why don't we leverage big data that we have collected throughout 2 decades to actually filter, the type of works that is typically desk reject or, early reject, for example, to save ourselves some effort and time. And that's, the only way to combat AI is to use AI, right? And that's true in cybersecurity as well. It's kind of like, it's impossible to rely on a human to do that kind of job. It's just, tremendous, right? And so we are talking about, our community that apply AI to solve other problem. Why can't we just use AI to solve our own problem now that we have the data, we have the capability to train, fine-tune our own model. And I'm not saying that you should upload it to, some random service server. The community should have its own model that is offered to our own community to curate. And at the end of the day, why don't we have a shadow committee similar to like shadow government where basically, let's say, you have the human committee, you can have AI committee. Let's see what they produce, right? Like AI committee can probably produce proceeding like 5 versions in over a week. And then, you can compare the quality of those proceedings to the one produced by human, right? Like that's very easy, right? Like when we review papers, what do? We read, we watch video, and we judge from what we see. We don't get to experience the system. We don't, how many people actually examine and go through the data, if they actually put those data into supplementary materials, for example, right? Do you have time for that? We don't, right? Certain things can be offload, right? And is just the transition period now? When do we start? Or do we need to be forced to adopt later when it become more, unmanageable, right? Sorry, I just...
Yes, please.
Thank you. I just want to say very, very briefly, I'm Senior Program Committee on Triple AI Conference, which this year had 30,000 submissions. And as part of an experiment for everybody, I'm responsible for curating 18 papers, and every paper is reviewed by some people, including an AI. So every paper has an AI review, and the AI does not score the paper, it just presents the review. And I read all these reviews, and I have to say, in every one of these cases, it was helpful. It was very detailed, sometimes too nitpicky, but it was very, very good. And so they're actually curating this right now, and they're evaluating the quality, and there's a whole sort of feedback process, evaluating and judging how helpful reviewers found it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the community basically in AI is already there. They're doing it. So I'm just saying this as a sort of comment. I'm happy to discuss with people here, but it's happening. And actually, from my point of view, it is very good. So there is the capacity and capability out there. So I think it's a matter not of if, but when, as reviewing, etc. And I agree with some of these comments. So I just wanted to point this out. Thank you.
Thank you for that comment. I'd like to point out that there are 2 kinds of AI reviews that I have in mind, at least. Some that are horrible, absolutely generic. They don't contribute anything. They don't inform at all. They don't go anywhere. But the good reviews, you probably don't even notice them. You cannot even tell, right? Like if they're good and they pass for human reviews, then you have no chance. And to pick up on what you said, I forget your name. Thank you for that, Christian. Yeah, sorry. It sounds like that should be a tool that authors have as they prepare their paper. Like, why not iterate several times and you kind of know that your paper will get in at that point, I guess, since the AI pre-validates it. I don't know. That's also something to think about, but I think that.
Can somebody get a microphone to Steve? Yeah, thanks.
I'm going to add one little
Yeah.
thing before Steve.
Oh,
'Cause,
sorry.
so I think I actually wanted to bring up the AAAI, so I'm glad that you did, and you're actually on the committee doing this. But I think one thing that's important to note on that is that you are actively having one AI reviewer and you're having humans. The problem is when we ask a human to do it and then they give us an AI review. And so then we don't know how many humans have actually done the review of the paper. So I love what you're doing and I can't wait to hear more about it, but we still need to make sure that we know that there's a human.
Like a very short one. Yeah, I was just curious because how you actually instruct the reviewers and then people. I mean, I think it's the most important part. Like as we mentioned, like what's the official like a policy, that kind of thing. I was just wondering. We can actually catch up again later, but I was actually trying to pointing out that kind of policy stuff as well. Yeah, Steve.
So I just wanted to say two things. One of them is that when you tell a person that they can't do something, if you tell students they can't cheat in the old-fashioned way, you can often find two people that are clearly cheating. You can talk with them, and ultimately, my experience is they'll finally admit it. But you're not going to go and talk to ChatGPT and said, oh, did you actually collaborate with this person? And so if someone uses it in a way in which they're really trying to be very ethical about it, and they're not just going to go and have AI write a review and then submit it, but they're going to look at it very carefully, make sure that if there's a citation being suggested, that it is a real citation, not a hallucinated one, and one that actually really is relevant and not irrelevant. There's going to be basically no way that you're going to be able to tell whether that's been done or not. Now, another important point is that notion about, let's protect confidentiality. Don't feed it to AI because it's going to be out there. That is true of a lot of AI, but my university is one of many that have deals with OpenAI in which we have access to ChatGPT that can be used for HIPAA-protected patient data. We can actually put stuff in that's really super confidential because what goes into that AI does not come out except on my desk if I put it in there. And so if you say that that's a reason, you might have some people who have access to these things and go, oh, in that case, I can use it because it's not going to violate confidentiality, right? So I think that reason works only with versions of AI that really do put things out there. It's not really a good reason for not using AI that doesn't do that. There are obviously better reasons than that. And I think you have to be careful when you make that a reason, because there's some people who just say, oh, it doesn't apply to me.
Yeah. Well, yeah, thank you for all opinions. It seems like we all emphasize with we're gonna use the AI in somehow to more have some. Oh, maybe we have one additional opinion. Yeah.
Yes, just my comment is I don't think there's a clear expectation for the general community here. And okay, I'm being an old fart here, but I was on every program when I was young academic. I tried to get on every program committee I could get on of a legitimate program. I reviewed as many papers as I could to be a good corporate citizen, but it also helped with my promotions. Okay. But what I'm saying is I don't hear any clear, I'm not these, it's just the community in general. My expectation when I put a paper into it, I was going to personally review at least 3 other papers because I knew there were going to be 3 other papers on there, or my team would. Okay. But I never hear any clear expectations. If you're on the program committee, this is what you're going to do. And I know there's a long written policy and stuff like that. But I think if we communicate clear expectations for what it means to be part of this community, that might help a little bit. Because to be honest with you, I get really tired when I ask somebody to review a paper and then it's like, oh, but I've already reviewed 2 papers this year. and it's like not for this conference in total. so I think if the community could come up with a list of, if you remember this community, this is what we expect you to do.
Yeah, so thank you. I think there still AI is in our life, so I'm quite sure we cannot like just ignore it, but we all kind of empathize with kind of figure out the way to ethically utilize AI for reviewing. And yeah, but yeah, that's like kind of I can summarize like that. So let's go on to the second one is about actually the ethics challenges. So what can we as more community establish clear, more consistent ethical guidelines? So this is really, to be honest, like if I submitted like 2 papers, at least I can get 1 review about like this ethical issues. So what do you think about this? And
I can start, but I honestly, to be honest, I don't have a clear solution or answers. I mean, Daniel is here, and then he and I and Rick Scarvez were the VRSD program chairs this year, and then we also talk about like ethics stuff as well, whether we're gonna actually include that like ethical approval information in the submission form or not. So, and then while I was doing this like ISMA programming community roles, I wasn't entirely sure, to be honest, like because every institute or like every country has different policies or something. So what I heard from like a different people is some European countries have different policies about the IRB ethical approvals. So some research it don't require that kind of like a IRB, but exactly the same research may need ethical approval in different countries. Then how we're gonna actually treat them. So I was actually a bit surprised whether we actually differentiate that kind of thing. So to be honest, I have no idea. Maybe you guys have like a different thoughts or ideas.
So currently, the ethical review process across the world is very complicated. So every country, every institution has its own policy. But in general, IRBs exist in many places. But there are also external IRBs that are out there. The challenge that we're facing is, well, one, as a research community, it is important that we treat our participants well and fairly and ethically. So that's one thing that we do need to be keeping in mind. And that's why these boards are out there, is to make sure that that's actually happening. What we're unfortunately seeing on the chairing side is that there are papers where people are actively lying to us, where they're saying we don't need ethical review because we don't have any participants in this paper. And then the paper is a user study paper, and they're reporting data on participants. And so we've seen instances like this. We've had instances where people have submitted fake IRBs to us that they created on their own. So people are actively lying, which is a big issue. And it's hard on our side because we're trying to actually publish work. And if we're publishing things that are potentially harming people, then that makes us look bad. That makes us as a community look bad. And so figuring out, are there ways that we can do this where we could even go all the way to an extreme and say, no matter what, you need an IRB, and that you use an external one if your institution doesn't have one. We could potentially go to that extreme. We're not there yet. The guidelines that we have been using is what IEEE defines in their documentation, which is that you need to report in the paper that you have IRB approval, or you need to report that you do not have it and that your institution does not require it. You need to document that in the official paper. And so if you are lying in your paper, that is out there for the world to see. And I'm not saying you are, but I'm just saying that that is something that we've unfortunately been seeing on the chairing side.
absolutely agree with all of that, but I had a thought in a different direction. I think that, um, and I've been collaborating with Purdue's IRB as they're moving on to a new system, software review process, and so on. So what I'm trying to say is that the IRBs are overwhelmed and they're absolutely behind and have no idea how they're going to get to all the protocols that have been submitted for review. So I don't know that we have anyone here who's actually serving on an IRB, but every time you talk to them, they'll tell you their horror stories and how impossible it is for them to really review, and that leads to inconsistencies. And one thing we could do is to help standardize how a specific VR study, I mean, our VR studies are not that different, right? So for example, headset is in pass-through mode and the participant is seated, maybe that could be an exempt study. And there is huge variability. Like some institutions in the US will call that, non-exempt, and you'll need 3 months to get that through. And some other people will be like, what do you want from me? Like, they're seated, they're not gonna fall, they're not gonna, like, yeah, this is fine. So if we as a community can come up, and I know we all have a lot of spare time and we're jumping up and down to do this, but it'll be nice to sort of try to define types of studies and then to have a consensus amongst IRBs as to how they need to be treated, what the precautions have to be, as opposed to having to rewrite those precautions over and over again with every new PhD student you have and new approaches for that. So there is a lot of paperwork or a lot of redundancy that could be avoided. We could streamline the process a little bit. They're struggling. So the IRB, our IRB is 3 months behind right now. And anyway.
Yeah, any thoughts about? So
Yeah, I don't want us to do all of the talking. So if someone in the audience would like to make a statement or ask
Yeah.
a question, please. Yeah, Toby, go. Someone get a mic over there to him if you can. Thanks.
I'm on, not a question, more a statement. I mean, following up on what you said. So my opinion, I worked at many universities with very different regulations. I think it's close to impossible to unify it. I think it would even be bad.
Yeah.
So the point is, why not just keep what we currently have? Because exactly as you said, it seems we need it because there have been cases of unethical behavior, of lying. So we just leave it as is. We just need to document it because I think it seems important, because then you can say, if you can, it's somehow documented at least. People clicked at some point yes or no, but the rest is really responsible for their university, because it's really like, if sorry, Voiko, but if you know it takes 3 months, sorry, then it's your job to hand it a bit in earlier, like it's the same for mine, and I know kind of what study is needed and so on. I think it's our job, and to discuss it with university. Again, I think it can't be streamified, but I think at the same time it's important to document it. So I think maybe my closing thing is, it's probably good as it is. Now you need to click something. I hope after this discussion we understand why we need to click something, why we need to collect this information. And yeah, I don't see a reasonable way to move further. It's your responsibility in your contract to do it with your university.
Can I say something really fast? I think I agree with you, because I think there's so many differences across universities, even in the US, in terms of what's exempt and what's not exempt. But I actually think Bruce's comment was really apropos to this discussion as well. Like, we can think about ethical guidelines for the participants, but I also think we should think about ethical guidelines for ourselves. And it is the right ethical thing to do to protect participants in our studies. And at the end of the day, we should be doing the right thing, however that works for you. But maybe we as a community need to say that that is one of the things that we uphold. And if you're a part of this community, you need to be taking care of your participants and not putting them at risk without letting them know that they're at risk.
Let's discuss it later.
You can go first. No? Okay.
Just a quick observation, and to make more work for you guys. If you put all the information into the system in such a way that it's protected, that only a chair of ethical guidelines can see, that the responsibility, maybe you just go and check these things. If you're really worried about this, you go and it says, here's the number for the protocol, here's the person you contact to make sure that it was done, and here's the name of the protocol, here's the blah, 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 blah. And then you write to those people and said, does this protocol exist? And if it doesn't exist, the paper just gets pulled. It's as simple as it, or if they send it back like saying, no, our university doesn't have an ethics protocol, so we don't do it.
That is in the system now. So we do actually, I think both ISMAR and VR ask IRB protocol number, contact information,
Oh, you do check it.
date of when it was submitted or when it was received. And we have contacted places and pulled papers
Okay.
for exactly what you have said.
But is that universal for all papers?
That's a lot of work, though.
It
I know.
is-
I'm
yes.
look. I'm.
It's then we get back to.
Hey, I'm
the-
retired. I don't have to worry about it.
This goes back to the IPC. Yeah.
Yeah, I've got time to do it. Okay.
It goes on to the reviewing community to do a lot of the checking. And so this is where the APC comes in, so the associate program chairs and the general chairs and the reviewers to double check that that stuff is actually in there and is correct. So it's a lot of work.
So in the meantime, may I ask, what's the current punishment for misconduct?
The current conduct is that you are reported to IEEE and that they perform a search on you, and you can be reported to the steering committee. You can be put onto a blacklist. You can be and IEEE can impose additional sanctions where you can be removed from the community. Your paper can be kicked out. You can be banned from submitting to any IEEE venue for multiple years.
I
So
think we need to emphasize that.
Yeah, so there is punishment for such things.
So there are other ways to cheat as well, right? So people can cut corners in their code, they can falsify data, etc. And one of the ways by which we address this type of cheating, at least in other communities, is through the use of artifact evaluation. But that's a very complex kind of process where you set up a committee to evaluate artifacts, et cetera, et cetera. But the whole open source movement has resulted in a lot of transparency that's sort of inherent in the community now. If you don't put your code out for open source, others can't replicate your work and build upon it. It's kind of frowned upon. And this is just a pure process. Nobody's enforcing this. And so I'm just wondering, does it make sense to ask to get into a culture where people are publishing or putting out their IRB protocols? I don't know if there are confidentiality issues there. One way that would have helped someone like me, who is a systems person, never did user studies until I started working on XR, and I was pretty clueless about how to write IRB protocols. It sure would have been helpful to have a whole bunch of examples out there. So just a thought.
Yeah, and I'm going to add that in some other fields like psychology, journals are now requiring that you do put all of your materials on OSF, including your IRB approval, so that this is out there in the world and people can go to see that you had approval for this work before you started it. So that is something that other fields are adopting. I think that's a great point.
I'm going to emphasize a statement you just made. You should have the IRB approval before you start the work.
Yeah.
One thing that I wanted to say is some of my friends actually reached out to me and they mentioned about like a fairness of this. Because here, what I meant by like a fairness is actually some institute or country don't have that kind of like a ethical approval for the same study, and some universities or like a country has IRB, and then they can actually submit this as it is, and then they need to actually have like an ethical approval. Then what's is that fair? That kind of concern was there, and also sometimes, so for example, they actually collaborate with international collaboration. And then there is another institute who don't need the IRB. Then it's much quicker and faster to run the participants. then does it matter? I mean, is it okay? And then is it better for me to actually find the researchers in a different country who doesn't who don't need that ethical approval? So what I wanted to say is, right now I think we're gonna actually stick with the current plan and then interpret the policy. But I want you to understand our difficulties in this ethical approval, so that I don't want you to actually feel like I wouldn't say like I don't know the correct terminology, but I don't want you to feel like to be treated as like unfair settings or something. So that's something that I wanted to actually say.
Yeah, on that note, I think that's a really important point. So Tabitha mentioned external IRBs before, which definitely do exist, but they're not free, at least not the ones that I know of. So I think it would be unfair to require people who live in a country or work at a university that doesn't have an IRB to have external IRB approval. It would be an equity issue there as well. So I don't know what the solution is. I mean, maybe when papers are submitted and you say, I have IRB approval and here it is, or I don't because I'm not required to, but I certify that I did X, Y, and Z, whatever standard we can come up with as a community to say that at least there was some minimal level of protection for participants.
So I don't disagree, but I'm up here so I get to come up with other crazy things. We can have grants for institutions that don't have an IRB that we can ask VGTC for a pot of money to pay for ethical approval for those institutions. So I think we could come up with a way that we could make it so that people wouldn't have to pay for it and still still encourage the community to do this. So I think we can try and think outside the box of how to support everybody.
Yes, great. So as a fresh PhD, it's like almost everything is like new information. I've never like think of it because what I've done is just write down my IRB and wrote down the number, and I've no idea how it's gonna work in that side. And I think many of us all it's really good to know about how it works and going on. So yeah, it was really good. And let's move on to I think it's maybe the last question, I guess. So yeah, third one is about the diversity issue. So of course we are aware of like how do we distinguish between when participant diversity is a methodological necessity for a study's validity versus when it is desirable feature. So yeah, most cases we conducted like experiments within like 20 to 40 participants, and of course diversity is important, but it's quite like hard to figure out some like line to manage it. So do you have any opinions or share some thoughts about it?
I'm going to maybe say something controversial, but I'm sort of anti any required diversity initiative here because, well, one, at my institution, we can't even say the word diversity anymore after the recent election, so that would not go over well with my IRB necessarily. But two, I think the research question that you're asking dictates whether you should have a diverse population or not the other way around. You shouldn't have to start from a diverse population, right? If I'm studying vision, do I have to run blind people? Do I have to run people with low vision? Do I have to get this whole gamut? And if that's not part of my research question, why should I have to do that? Furthermore, there's not any research like really suggesting that for a lot of visual aspects of our eyes, females and males are different. So do I need to run both non-binary too? Like, do I need to run all of these people when there isn't a background research suggesting that diversity matters in the question that I'm asking? I think this is a slippery slope, and I think we have to be really careful in demanding these types of things. And I am seeing this happening in our communities, and it bothers me a bit because it goes against the idea of you should have a research question and you should be answering it in the best way possible, and your hypotheses should be derived from your research question, and that should dictate your pool to me. But I'll let others speak.
Yeah, I think that you should report your demographics, and at that point, it, it, it will be clear that you're making claims for that specific demographic. You said that, you know, maybe sometimes there's research that says that specific differences between participants matter for a specific research question, but I think that what you want to be sure of is that there is research that proves that it does not matter, as opposed to there is no research that proves that it matters. So not easy. Yeah.
So this is a tough one, and I agree with a lot of the things that you said. In general, what you need is you want to think about what is the population that you're studying, and whatever group that you have collected is what you can make statements on. So if you have collected only women, you can make statements about only women. If you've collected only 20 to 25-year-olds, you can make statements about only 20 to 25-year-olds. If you've collected only CS grad students, you can make a statement about CS grad students. And you have to recognize that that is a huge limitation in what you're actually looking at. And I think it's important to recognize that there are hidden things that we don't realize where diversity is going to matter. And so I'm going to encourage you to read the Mind the Gap paper that I wrote, where we actually did a meta-analysis looking at the gender distribution in participants, looking at simulator sickness questionnaire data. And what we found was that the percentage of women included in the study was significantly related to the change in simulator sickness across those studies, in the way that you didn't expect, that if there were more women, there was less change in simulator sickness. And that's never actually studied. So we always make these claims, but we're not including that group of people. So the other thing I'm going to encourage everyone to think about is at least look at the demographics of the population around you and strive to get that population. We're not expecting everybody to get every single race, every single gender, every single age, every single accessibility condition. There's a lot of diversity dimensions out there, but your pool should not look exactly the same. And it should not look exactly like you. And so as a community, it's important for you to think about, can you be a little bit more diverse?
Yeah, just a quick one, because I agree in everything that's said, and I think nobody's saying something controversial, at least from my perspective. Because I think the important part is, and that's, in a lot of papers, what I'm missing to see is a critical discussion of the sampling of the population. I think you're perfectly right, Janine, but most papers don't discuss the population at all. And they don't include it into their research questions, but it should be at least be discussed in the participant section, and then maybe also in the conclusion and discussion when it's specifically when it's a only man study, right? In psychology, there are often a lot of only man, only female studies, and that's perfectly fine. You just have to really point that out. It might be a first step. You want to generalize later. I just think it's not a good thing, and I agree that papers are rejected because of that, and only because of that. And yeah, you can also not do anything about that. It's a reject. I think that's not a good way to do it, because this comes down to the point your contribution is too small because of that, and I'm in general not a fan of rejecting papers because of contribution. I think it's leading us nowhere, but that's maybe a completely different story.
I wanted to make a comment. Hello, Maria Grotto, Duke University. It may be more helpful for the community to phrase it slightly differently than not what we should mandate in diversity, but more that how those who have achieved it share the insights with the rest of us. As I can tell you, for instance, my group has been trying to recruit people from a broader community. They're not coming to campus. We cannot attract them to campus. We have been trying to recruit people with different attentional abilities, and there's all sorts of correlations with that. But ultimately, we want to create a broader group of participants. It would be helpful if me and others had guidelines on how to do that better, because we've been trying to, and it's not working, like realistically speaking. So that's just a comment.
So I have a paper called Diversify, and it has a list of 10 guidelines for how to diverse your research participant pool. So we do have a list of guidelines, and I can share that with you. It's still hard. It is really, really hard, and I recognize that for a lot of people, pulling people onto your campuses is challenging. I recognize that the time commitment to get a large enough sample to pull in the different diversity, it takes time. It's just a matter of, do you want to do it? And I also recognize sometimes it is almost going to be impossible, and that it's not going to happen every time.
I would like to add, because this is ISMAR and not everybody is doing human research. And so there need to be some sort of education to help people understand and agree on, common goods and basically, ethical consideration, diversity consideration. What does it mean, right? And that's kind of like the thing that we need to add more. Yeah.
Okay. In terms of diversity, there's a diversity of places in which research gets done. And for example, at my place, there have been times in which it's been extremely difficult to get anyone who is not a student or a current occupant of campus on campus. And there may be other places where it's much easier. There are also campuses. So without revealing in a paper, the fact that I am in a situation like that, we have to be careful, because then a paper might get deep sixed because of issues that were really pretty much beyond the control of the people actually doing the work. Or in terms of diversity, do you want to have children also in the study? I know how difficult that is to go and have a study that has children in it. And it requires a lot more effort and a much more meticulous IRB process than normally required. And so if we really want to have that kind of diversity, it's going to make life very, very tough for people who are in that situation. One other thing about is maybe diversity of reviewers, and that's that different reviewers have different standards. And I think it'd be really important to have, I'm sorry. What? Okay. Oh, yeah. Different reviewers have different standards, and so you'll have some reviewers for whom it's got to have a power analysis, right? And if you get those reviewers, your paper gets thrown out without a power analysis, and yet you look at the proceedings and all those papers that have no power analyses, right? Different reviewers have different standards about type 1 errors. Some people are going to sit there and do Bonferroni or home Bonferroni or whatever your favorite approach is, maybe in some cases decided after the fact, because you don't have to register the things that you're doing in our field in advance. And you get really, really low p-values. Yeah, we'll use Bonferroni, right? They're not so low, we'll use something else. So I think having guidance to reviewers, maybe even, and this is going to be tricky because people are going to disagree. Do papers that have studies have to have a power analysis? Do papers that have studies and that are looking at and evaluating things based on p-values, do they have to take into account type 1 errors? Because otherwise you're going to have different, the same paper could get, if literally, given to different sets of reviewers, might get very different reviews because those reviewers have different standards, and there is no single standard that we're going to hold people to, and that's not fair.
Yeah, sorry, Christian again. Actually, to the last comment, I would say absolutely yes. Every paper that has participants needs a power analysis and worries about type 1 error. But in the meantime, I think the reason is, why do we worry about this, is because of generalization. Same issue with diversity in general. We want to generalize further. And why don't we mandate a limitation section where people actually are aware and make aware that the sample size consists of the weird sample or something, white, educated, industrialized, rich, democratic, and make it explicit. Say these are the people we tested, so it can generalize to that population, and then it's to the reviewer and the community to check the impact of said paper based on those limitations. That could be a possible solution.
Also an answer directly to what Steve said. I agree, and it's unfair, but guidelines are nice. But we also, I think there's a lot of big advantage of research and scientific processes that we have floating standards and that they are quickly adapting because they are not written down. So when we write down everything, it's taking longer that things adapt, right? We might agree on a limited set of standards, like every analysis needs there has to be a power analysis and stuff like that. But where's the line? So statistics are evolving, which is great. When I did my PhD, that's all horrible. All these studies, just trash them statistically, and it's much better now. And I'm wondering if we can adapt fast enough when we write down standards. Somehow the reviewing process is decentralized, and that has disadvantages. It's unfair, but it has massive advantages. It's all these standards, they are living standards. They are evolving with the reviewing pool, and they also can adapt very quickly, which is, I think, an advantage we give away when we write too much things down, which is saying not we should maybe write more things down, but then more things have to be read, which also is a difficult thing. And yeah, just my.
I do have a question for the panel. The diversity question in the review and submission and things. When did this become an issue, and what was the particular issue that this policy was trying to address? Because we've heard why you want to do it, and we heard why you can't do it. What was the issue that this was trying to solve?
If I understood your question correctly, what are the current issues related to this diversity in terms of the reviewing process? Or I just wanted to make sure if I understand you correctly.
The question is, this became a criteria for papers. Did it match a diversity issue? And pretty ill-defined what that meant. There must have been some issue that prompted that question to get put into the reviewing form.
Okay. Then maybe I'm not the good person to answer that, because I'm not the one who actually added that kind of the section. But I mean, at least I can say something related to this. At the moment, right now, what I found is a kind of a difficulty or issue is sometimes, as Daniel mentioned, some reviewers actually weigh on that section quite a bit. So sometimes, for example, even myself, I received one of the reviewers actually put the lower score, and then they said the diversity of the population of the study sample are not diverse enough, that kind of stuff. But I was kind of surprised because it doesn't matter that much in my study. Maybe their reviewers' perception and my perception may not be the same. So that kind of issue happened. So that's at least that's what I was concerned at this point related to this diversity thing. But I'm not sure what was the previous issue and then how we actually ended up adding this section.
So I can guess as to why, but I don't know for sure. But I think it has to do with the fact that not everybody has been trained in how to run a user study. And I think to bring awareness to people when they're doing these reviews of what does that population look like? Because if you go back in time in terms of the papers in this community, people didn't even report demographics. You just said, I ran 6 people. I ran 13 people, and you didn't say anything about age, gender, race. You reported nothing. And if you look at the psychology guidelines of how you're actually supposed to report a user study, that's against policy. Like, you need to be able to say who was actually in the study so that you can determine, is it a generalizable statement? What can we actually determine about the results? And so I'm guessing that that question was asked to prompt the community to think about who is actually in this study. Does it look like it was a distribution of CS graduate students, or are you studying an elderly population, which, wow, that makes this study really interesting because we don't normally see that. And so I think it was intended to help the reviewers think about the potential impact of the work.
Did any of us up here put this into the review process? Like, when did this come into play? I don't even know. Any of you senior people in the audience aware of when this became a part? So who put this in if it was? Okay. AI put it in. Thanks, Doug. Bruce, I don't know. We don't have an answer, but I would guess that this probably came about, in making a guess like Tabitha did, when replication crises started happening everywhere. So a big deal in replication is that you need to know the people who were run in a previous study in order to try to replicate it. So again, if people aren't reporting demographics, you're limiting the ability to try to replicate that work. And I think that just that crisis kind of hit in the last, 10 years, and it's been kind of growing. So I would guess maybe it was also related to that, since none of us did it.
Then if you don't know why you're doing it, don't do it. But besides for that,
I do think it's important for that reason.
And my guess is,
yeah,
Kai did it, so then we did it. That's
No
just
idea.
a guess. But I do like the fact that that there are things in the review process that says, you talk about the contribution, talk about this, and if it's a use study, make sure they talk about this and the limitations, and not have it as a tick box. Did they do this?
Yes. Yeah.
Because now you're gonna say, well, I did what you asked me to do, and it's not gonna get rejected because of what everybody. Because maybe we can fix this. I don't know.
Yeah, I wanted to actually. Do we have time? Yeah, I I wanted to point out something related to this as well. At least for now, in this room, no one knows who actually put this one, but I think it's also part of the current trends to include diversity, equity, or inclusion, accessibility, all that kind of things. I think, no, don't you think so? Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, I don't know, but I feel like totally agree with Jinin. At the beginning, you mentioned about anti. I mean, you're not anti about this, but but when I look at the paper from time to time, honestly, I didn't think this way before. I mean, maybe part of the reason is actually I moved to Canada and then live in this North America for a while, and then we talk about this diversity all the time. To be honest, in Korea, I never talk about this diversity, that kind of. So we're like the same face all the time. So, but these days, Korea has a lot of concern about this diversity as well, because we have a lot of immigrants from different countries as well. So now I think it's more and more important to have that kind of stuff. So going back to the point that I wanted to make is that when I look at the papers from time to time, including myself, I reported the population, and then typically I put the age, and then female, male. And then some people may feel offended because the gender has so many categories, and then we just categorize between a female and male, and then why I'm not there. So I think maybe a Canada is very a liberal place in that sense. So some people actually commented about that, how I can check my gender diversity, all that kind of stuff. So these days, previously when I was in the U.S. Several years ago, when I ran the study, I had only a female, male, and other. That kind of a category. But these days, I try to list all the government. The document has all the different types of genders. So at least that's what I'm trying to do, so that the participants feel like, yeah, yeah. Anyway, that's the point that I kind of briefly mentioned.
I know we're running out of time, and I was really hoping to see this question on the slides, and unfortunately it was not there because I think it's a current problem, and this is scalability. We don't need to discuss it now, but I like to think that everybody wants to receive a quality review, but being in the process, I feel like not everybody is willing to give a quality review. It seems that submissions keep growing, the community keeps growing, but it's getting harder and harder to find a good amount of reviewers that are actually willing to provide that quality review. So I know this will be controversial, but complaining against the review process is kind of complaining about ourselves, right? We are those that provide the review. So again, we don't need to discuss it now if there is no time, but I think that's something that it's important.
This is the burning question in the room, Alejandro. So thank you for bringing it up. And I'm sure plenty of us are feeling it right now because we're literally here at a conference, and we're probably many of us being asked to assign reviewers to VR papers right now, and we're not doing that because we're at this nice conference. But it is, I feel it. It's a constant ask. It's nonstop reviewing. And so many of the people in this room are on IPC, and so then where do I find new reviewers? So one of the goals of this session, I wanted to bring it up, we had all talked about it, was to paper chairs for next year. Some of them have already been identified, are asking us to say, if we have new reviewers in the room who would like to review, please reach out to us. And one of the things we're thinking about doing is some online sessions. If you haven't reviewed as much before and you don't feel as comfortable doing that, maybe we think about doing training as a community to, again, try to uphold these standards that we're asking people to uphold, but we're not maybe giving them the knowledge to do that. So I appreciate all the questions around these issues of like, how do we get this population if we don't know how? How do we write an IRB if we don't know how? I think we as a community need to consider doing a better job of onboarding people into these tasks if they haven't gotten an opportunity to learn them in some other way. And so please do keep giving us these suggestions, and maybe one of the things we could do as a community is run some online tutorials around these things, because I think the scalability question is like the $1 million question in the room. Like, how can we keep this going with more and more and more submissions? Where are we going to find these quality reviews? I don't know if anyone else has a
I mean, Duyong actually showed this slide. We actually had a couple more questions or like topics, but you know, like we don't have much time at this point. But one thing that I pointed out is actually scalability, quality related issues of this review. Going back to like Daniel's points or like Bruce's points, I think the important part is actually the communication between the reviewers and IPCs and then program chairs, all things. I mean, among these people in our community, so that we're in the same page in terms of this reviewing process, and then people understand how we actually treat this paper. So that's the most important part. To be honest, while I was doing these program chairs or IPC members, I kind of like felt that kind of like lack of connection and then understanding of this process. And then to be honest, like there are like a lot of people like newly, I mean, joined that IPC members. They don't know, and then from time to time I saw like they made very like basic mistakes as well. So as a program committee or like a program chairs, I think we need to actually communicate them more. And then I heard, I mean, I was not in that like a Kai community at all, but the Kai community has a lot of like meetings and then subcommittee meetings so that they can actually meet with the IPC members multiple times and then share their like policies and then the guidelines. So I think we should actually, previously what I heard is ISMA or IEEE, we had that kind of like a communication channel, like online channels, so that we can meet up and then share the guidelines and then Q&A sessions among these IPC members. So I personally think it's very important to communicate with them, and then we share that same knowledge about this reviewing process.
I know this might even be super naive, but would we ever consider to put like some examples online, mock examples that would tell people this is a good review, this is not a good review?
We've considered doing that in the past, and so I think we would be open to suggestions. If people have ideas, please share them with us as we move forward next year. We could try to implement some of this. Just a show of hands, like how many of the young people in the room would attend an online tutorial about reviewing if we offered it? Okay, great. Toby, go ahead. Sorry.
Maybe a quick one, and this is maybe something that we started to do, but maybe this is actually to the people who are, for example, in program committee roles. And this is really acknowledge the reviewers, because basically one thing is to that you provide templates. I thought we have this anyways. But for example, as you hopefully all know in PCS, you can actually indicate like a review of outstanding quality or that was helpful. Because I've seen this when I was, for example, a chair for IEEE VR. We tried to send out, for example, small certificate for almost every role that is not compensating somehow for all the time that the people spent, but it was a small way of thanking you for your service somehow. And the same way, I think if you really did a good review, then I think it should be really somehow there should be evidence for that. Yeah, for example, that you see it and PCS, that people use this functionality. So long story short, I think we should really use the feature, start to use the feature. It's a really small thing that we thank our reviewers if something was really good, that we acknowledge that, they can check it, they can print it out, use it as CV, whatever, because that costs almost no time. And this would be a start and would make some people a bit happy.
I think this is a great idea, and there are a few other conferences that I go to run by ACM, smaller conferences where we actually give out a best reviewer award. That this person wrote the best review of the year, and they get acknowledged at the program, which I think is an excellent idea.
We have time to discuss this, but I mean, like for me, when I started out, right, before reviewing for a premier conference like ISMAR, I started from smaller conference with lower expectation. Give me training and work up my way to have a build a higher expectation of their contribution, for example. And so like what would be the sisters conference or venue that is considered lower than ISMAR? This is a Premier League, and so what's the Division 1, Division 2, that to build this experience, give them a place to trials and errors and kind of like learn from their mistakes, and that is kind of like the questions here. Again, all of this, we are one community in a way. You review for IEEE VR, you do review for BISD and SUI and other related conferences, but these are not quite connected, and we don't utilize what we know, what we learn across. And so, yeah, community, again, why do we have community if we don't utilize it in the way that we're supposed to? And that's the thing that we should think more about, right?
Yes, so thank you for all opinions. And so what I've thought about through this panel discussion is that I think we should more love each other. Because like all reviewers are, because means they're all researchers and they know there's some limitations. We cannot do the perfect work. So we should be more, have some, felt of love to what I'm reviewing, and try to figure out some factors that we can like have some more motivation about it and sort of that things. So yeah, well, it's quite hard to summarize all these steps, but thank you for being here. And actually this panel session was just like brainstormed like 5 days ago to because there's no panel session in ISMAR. So
Thank
I'm really,
you to Du Young for putting it together. It was really a good idea. Yes.
So yeah, thank you all to being here, and thank you for all great panelists and all opinions from the floor. Yeah, thank you.
Before we leave, can we actually have a selfie? At least these people are care about our community, I guess. So maybe we can actually stand over here all together and then make a selfie together. like this. Come here, Tom. Yeah. Are we there? Okay. Everybody cheat.